Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. I never thought I'd end up in a legal battle over my own backyard pool, but that's exactly what happened thanks to my entitled neighbor Steve. This whole ridiculous ordeal dragged on for months and cost me thousands in lawyer fees, but in the end, justice prevailed. Let me start from the beginning and tell you how this mess unfolded. My name's Mike, and I've lived in my current house for about 5 years now. It's a nice place in a quiet suburban neighborhood, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, decent-sized backyard. When I first moved in, the backyard was pretty bare, just a plain grass lawn with a small concrete patio. But I had always dreamed of having my own pool, so I started saving up. After a few years of putting money aside, I finally had enough to install an in-ground pool. Nothing too fancy, just a standard 16 by 32 rectangular pool with a small diving board. The installation process took about 2 months from start to finish. There was a lot of digging and construction noise, but I made sure to give all my immediate neighbors a heads up before work began. Most of them were cool about it and even seemed excited for me. All except Steve. Steve lived in the house directly behind mine, with our backyard sharing a fence line. He was in his late 50s, divorced, and seemed to spend most of his time puttering around his yard and complaining about the neighborhood. From day one, he was not happy about my pool plans. The first time I tried to give him a friendly heads up about the upcoming construction, he immediately started grumbling. A pool? In this neighborhood? That's gonna bring down property values, you know. Not to mention all the noise and commotion. I don't need to be listening to screaming kids splashing around all summer. I tried to reassure him. Oh, don't worry, I'm not planning any wild pool parties or anything. It'll mostly just be for me to relax and do some laps. Maybe have a few friends over occasionally on weekends. Steve just grunted and walked away without another word. I figured he was just being a grumpy old man and didn't think much more of it at the time. Oh, how naive I was. The pool installation went smoothly overall. There were a few days of loud digging and concrete pouring, but the crew was efficient and tried to minimize disruptions. I made a point of checking in with my other neighbors to make sure the noise wasn't bothering them too much. Everyone seemed understanding. Steve, on the other hand, found excuses to come out and glare at the workers every single day. He'd stand right at the fence line with his arms crossed, scowling. A few times I heard him making snide comments, but the workers just ignored him. Finally, after about 8 weeks, my beautiful new pool was complete. The water was sparkling blue, the concrete decking looked great, and I even sprung for some nice lounge chairs and umbrellas to create a little oasis. I was so excited to start enjoying it. That first weekend, I invited a few close friends over for a small pool warming party. Nothing crazy, just 6 of us total, hanging out and swimming on a Saturday afternoon. We had some music playing softly and were chatting and laughing, but certainly not being overly loud or disruptive. Suddenly, Steve's angry voice came booming over the fence. Hey, keep it down over there. Some of us are trying to have a peaceful weekend. I was taken aback. We really weren't being that loud at all. I walked over towards the fence. Sorry, Steve, we'll try to keep it down, but I don't think we're being unreasonably noisy. It's only 3 p.m. on a Saturday. I don't care what time it is, Steve snapped. That pool is a nuisance and I won't stand for it. Mark my words, this isn't over. With that ominous threat, he stormed back into his house. My friends and I exchanged bewildered looks. Wow, what's that guy's problem? My friend Tom asked. I shrugged. He's been grumpy about the pool from the start. Hopefully he'll get used to it and calm down. We went back to enjoying our afternoon, though the confrontation with Steve had certainly put a damper on things. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of Steve's crusade against my pool. Over the next few weeks, Steve's behavior escalated from grumpy to truly unhinged. Anytime I was out using the pool, even if I was just quietly reading a book on a lounge chair, he'd find an excuse to come outside and complain about the noise. He started calling the police with noise complaints, even when it was the middle of the day and I was barely making a sound. The cops would show up, see that nothing was amiss, and leave looking annoyed at Steve for wasting their time. Then Steve started making wild accusations to the other neighbors. He claimed my pool was lowering property values and attracting undesirables to the neighborhood. He said the chlorine fumes were making him sick. He even tried to start a petition to have my pool filled in, but none of the other neighbors would sign it. I tried reasoning with Steve multiple times, but he refused to listen. He was convinced my pool was some kind of personal attack on him. I suggested mediation, offered to adjust my pool usage times, even said I'd chip in for some noise-blocking plants along our shared fence line. But Steve wouldn't budge an inch. Things came to a head about 2 months after my pool was finished. It was a sweltering Sunday afternoon in the middle of a heat wave. The temperature was pushing 100 degrees. I had just gotten home from running some errands and was looking forward to a refreshing swim. As I walked out to my backyard, I stopped dead in my tracks. There was Steve, lounging on one of my pool chairs with his feet in my pool. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I yelled, storming over to him. Steve didn't even flinch. He just looked at me with this smug grin and said, "Cooling off in my pool. What's it look like?" I was dumbfounded. "Your pool? What are you talking about? This is my pool that I paid for. You need to leave right now before I call the police." Steve's grin got even wider. "Go ahead and call them. I've got news for you, buddy. This pool is just as much mine as it is yours. Maybe even more so." "You've completely lost it," I said, pulling out my phone to call the cops. "I'm not playing games. Get out of my yard now." "Our yard," Steve said, standing up. "You see, I did some research. Turns out, your pool extends about 6 inches over the property line onto my land. That makes it partly mine. And since I never agreed to have it built, that means this whole thing is an illegal structure. So you can either share it with me, or I'll have the whole thing torn out." I was speechless. There was no way what he was saying could be true. I had all the proper permits and surveys done before construction, but Steve seemed so confident. For a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. Steve must have sensed my uncertainty. He pressed on. "That's right. It's all there in the county records. So here's how it's gonna be from now on. I get full use of the pool whenever I want, and you better keep it maintained real nice for me. Otherwise, I'll sue you for damages and force you to demolish it. Your choice." With that, he sauntered past me and out of my yard, leaving me standing there in shock. As soon as I snapped out of it, I called my lawyer. I couldn't believe Steve would try to pull something like this, but I wasn't going to let him get away with it. My lawyer, Sarah, was just as baffled as I was when I explained the situation. "That doesn't sound right at all," she said. "But don't worry, we'll get to the bottom of this. In the meantime, don't let Steve use your pool again. If he tries, call the police for trespassing." Over the next week, Sarah dug into all the legal documents related to my property and the pool construction. She got copies of the original lot surveys, building permits, and inspection reports. Everything looked completely above board on our end. "I don't see any evidence that your pool encroaches on Steve's property," Sarah told me. "The surveys all show it's fully within your lot lines. I'm not sure where he's getting his information from, but it's not matching up with the official records." I breathed a sigh of relief. "So he's just making this all up then?" "It seems that way," Sarah said. "But we need to take this seriously. If he really believes he has a claim, he could try to sue you. We should send him a formal cease and desist letter laying out the facts and warning him against trespassing or making false claims." I agreed, and Sarah drafted up the letter. We sent it via certified mail so we'd have proof Steve received it. I hoped that would be the end of it, but I underestimated just how delusional and stubborn Steve could be. A few days after Steve would have gotten the letter, I came home from work to find him once again lounging by my pool. This time he had a couple of his buddies with him too. They all had beers in hand and were acting like they owned the place. My blood was boiling, but I tried to stay calm. I walked over and said firmly, "Steve, you need to leave now. You're trespassing and you know it. I've already warned you once." Steve just laughed. "I don't think so, Mike. This is my pool and I'll use it whenever I damn well please. Your fancy lawyer letter doesn't change the facts." "What facts?" I shot back. "You're living in a fantasy world. There's zero evidence the pool is on your property. Now get out before I call the cops." "Go ahead," Steve sneered. "I've got proof right here." He held up some papers. "Survey from 1952 showing the original lot lines. Your pool crosses over plain as day." I didn't know what to make of that. I was pretty sure modern surveys would take precedence, but I wasn't a legal expert. I decided to document everything and let Sarah handle it. "Fine," I said, pulling out my phone to record. "I'm calling the police now and I'm recording this whole interaction. For the record, I'm telling you and your friends that you're trespassing on private property and need to leave immediately." Steve and his buddies grumbled but finally got up and left as I was on the phone with the police. They shouted some choice insults at me on their way out. The cops showed up a few minutes later and I explained the whole situation. They took a report and said they'd keep an eye out for Steve trespassing again. They also strongly advised me to pursue legal action if this continued. I sent all the information to Sarah right away. She was not happy about this escalation. "Okay, this is getting out of hand," she said. "That 1952 survey he's citing is completely irrelevant. Property lines can shift over time with easements and rezonings. The current official surveys are what matter legally. I think we need to file for a restraining order to keep Steve away from your property, and we should countersue for harassment and trespassing." I was hesitant to get into a big legal battle, but I knew Sarah was right. Steve clearly wasn't going to back down without a fight. So I gave Sarah the go-ahead to file the paperwork. Over the next few months, it was like a full-on war with Steve. He kept finding excuses to come into my yard or use the pool when I wasn't home. I had to install security cameras to catch him in the act. He'd yell insults and threats every time he saw me outside. He started spreading nasty rumors about me to the whole neighborhood. It was an incredibly stressful time. I dreaded coming home each day, wondering what new chaos Steve would bring. I couldn't enjoy my pool at all anymore. Just looking at it filled me with anxiety. Finally, our day in court arrived. Sarah had compiled an impressive amount of evidence showing that my pool was fully on my property and that Steve had been repeatedly trespassing and harassing me. She also had documentation of all the proper permits and surveys done during construction. Steve showed up representing himself, armed with his outdated survey and a bunch of crackpot conspiracy theories. He tried to argue that there was a vast cover-up by the city to steal land from homeowners. He claimed the modern GPS surveying technology was rigged. At one point he even accused me of bribing officials to falsify records. The judge was not impressed with Steve's arguments. She patiently listened to him rant for a while, then systematically dismantled every claim he made. She explained in detail why his old survey was irrelevant and how property lines are legally determined. In the end, the judge ruled entirely in my favor. She granted the restraining order against Steve, ordered him to pay damages for trespassing and harassment, and made it crystal clear that I had full legal ownership of the pool. She sternly warned Steve that any further violations would result in serious consequences. I walked out of that courtroom feeling an immense sense of relief. Steve, on the other hand, looked shell-shocked. I almost felt a little bad for him as reality came crashing down. Almost. In the days following the court ruling, Steve became a recluse. He stopped coming outside at all. I heard through the grapevine that he was telling people the judge was part of the conspiracy too. A few weeks later, "For sale" sign appeared in front of Steve's house. I guess the embarrassment of losing the case and having everyone know he was wrong was too much for him. Within a month, he was gone, moved away to who knows where. The new neighbors who bought Steve's old house are a lovely young couple. The first time I met them, they asked if they could bring their kids over to swim sometime. I happily agreed. These days, I'm finally able to relax and enjoy my pool in peace. The whole ordeal with Steve was a nightmare, but I'm glad I stood my ground and didn't let him bully me. My backyard oasis is even sweeter now, knowing I fought for it and won. Looking back, I still can't quite believe how crazy the situation got. It's a reminder that you never really know what's going on in someone else's head. Steve's misguided crusade against my pool seemed to consume his whole life for a while there. I hope he's found some peace wherever he ended up. As for me, I learned some valuable lessons about protecting myself legally and standing up to bullies. I'm much more careful now about documenting everything and not letting small issues fester into big problems. I've also developed a new appreciation for the importance of community. Throughout the whole ordeal, my other neighbors were incredibly supportive. They backed me up when Steve tried to turn them against me, and several even wrote character witness statements for the court case. It made me realize how lucky I am to live in a place with such great people, Steve excluded, of course. This summer, I'm planning to host a big neighborhood pool party to thank everyone for their support during the Steve saga. It'll be nice to create some positive memories around the pool and truly celebrate it as the community gathering place I always envisioned. Who knows, maybe someday I'll look back on this whole thing and laugh. For now, I'm just enjoying the sound of peaceful splashing in my backyard minus 100% Steve free. Update: it's been about a year since the court case with Steve, and I thought I'd give an update on how things have played out since then. Overall, life has been pretty great without Steve around. The new neighbors who moved into his old house, Tom and Sarah, are fantastic. They're a young couple with 2 kids, and they've become good friends. Their children love coming over to swim, and it's nice to see the pool being enjoyed the way I always imagined. The neighborhood pool party I mentioned planning was a huge success. Almost everyone on the block came, and it really helped to wash away the bad taste left by the whole Steve ordeal. People still bring it up sometimes, usually with a laugh about how ridiculous the situation was. It's become something of a neighborhood legend. I've gotten to know my other neighbors much better too. The support they showed during the Steve situation really brought us all closer together. We now have regular block parties and cookouts. It's like the whole neighborhood came alive once Steve's negative presence was gone. But of course, life isn't always smooth sailing. About 6 months after Steve moved away, I got a surprise in the mail, another legal notice. At first, my heart sank. I thought, oh no, not again. But as I read it, I realized it wasn't from Steve at all. It turns out, Steve had been renting his house, not owning it. The actual property owner had no idea about all the drama that had been going on. When they found out, after Steve moved out and they were preparing to sell, They were mortified. The notice I received was a formal apology from the property owner, along with an offer to cover any remaining legal fees I had from the case with Steve. I called Sarah, my lawyer, to get her take on it. She was as surprised as I was. "This is quite unusual," she said, "but it's actually a very smart move on their part. By offering to cover your legal fees, they're essentially trying to head off any potential lawsuit you might file against them as the property owners." I hadn't even considered the possibility of suing the property owners. Honestly, I was just glad the whole thing was over. But Sarah explained that in some cases, property owners can be held responsible for the actions of their tenants, especially if they were negligent in addressing issues. In this case, Sarah continued, they could potentially be seen as negligent for not stepping in sooner, especially given how long the issue went on. By offering to cover your fees up front, they're extending an olive branch and trying to resolve any potential claims before they arise. I thought about it for a while. On one hand, I had already won the case and moved on. Did I really want to dredge all this up again? On the other hand, I had spent a significant amount on legal fees, not to mention all the stress and hassle I'd been through. In the end, I decided to accept their offer to cover my remaining legal fees, but I didn't pursue any additional claims. It felt like the right thing to do. They hadn't known what was going on, and they were trying to make it right. Plus, I really just wanted to put the whole thing behind me. The property owners were incredibly grateful for my understanding. They even invited me to dinner to apologize in person and hear the full story. It was actually a nice evening, and we laughed about some of Steve's more ridiculous antics. They shared that they'd had issues with Steve as a tenant before, but nothing to this extent. Needless to say, they won't be renting to him again. This whole experience has taught me a lot about standing up for myself and the importance of knowing my rights. I've become much more proactive about addressing issues head-on instead of letting them fester. I've even started attending city council meetings to stay informed about local ordinances and zoning laws. You never know when that knowledge might come in handy. I've also taken steps to further secure my property. I upgraded my security camera system and installed a better fence around the pool area. Not because I'm worried about another Steve situation, but because it gives me peace of mind. Plus, it's good for safety with all the neighborhood kids coming over to swim. Speaking of the pool, I'm enjoying it more than ever now. The legal battle with Steve had initially tainted my feelings about it, but now I've reclaimed it as the peaceful oasis I always wanted. I've even started hosting swimming lessons for some of the neighborhood kids. It's become a real community gathering spot, which is exactly what I had hoped for when I first decided to install it. There was one final twist in the Steve saga. About a month ago, I received a letter from him. My first instinct was to throw it away unopened, but curiosity got the better of me. I'm glad I read it, because surprisingly, it was an apology. Steve wrote that he had been going through some personal issues during the time of our conflict. He'd recently been diagnosed with a mental health condition and had started treatment. He said it had made him realize how irrational his behavior had been. He apologized for all the trouble he'd caused and said he was working on making amends for his past actions. I have to admit, the letter left me with mixed feelings. On one hand, I appreciated the apology and was glad Steve was getting help. On the other hand, it didn't erase all the stress and hassle I'd been through. I decided not to respond to the letter. I wish Steve well, but I think it's best for both of us if we don't have any further contact. In the end, this whole experience has made me stronger and more confident. I stood my ground against unreasonable demands, navigated a complex legal situation, and came out on top. More importantly, I formed stronger bonds with my community and created the backyard paradise I always dreamed of. As I sit by the pool writing this update, I can hear the sounds of kids laughing and splashing. Tom from next door is firing up his grill for an impromptu barbecue. Later, some of us adults will probably enjoy a quiet evening swim once the kids are in bed. This is exactly the kind of summer day I envisioned when I decided to build this pool. Yes, there were some unexpected challenges along the way, but facing those challenges head-on and overcoming them has made me appreciate what I have even more. I'm grateful for my home, my pool, my neighbors, and the peace and quiet I now enjoy. And if another Steve ever comes along, well, let's just say I'll be more than ready to stand my ground again. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.